late night Day X World War III update, recording in the greenhouse tonight that is nearly complete. Won't be green until next year. I just hope it's green and bustling with edible vegetables before the shit hits the fan. The European Parliament passed a resolution today, which effectively is nothing short of a declaration of war against Russia. Perhaps not semantically, but in terms of what it materially translates into, yes, this is a declaration of war. They have voted by a wide margin, 425 to 131, with 63 abstaining, to allow the removal of restrictions on Ukraine to do deep strikes into Russia. Now, this is a political organization, not a military one. The United States is not beholden to its vassals, which means that NATO is not beholden to the EU, who appears hell-bent on triggering nuclear Armageddon, at least in Europe. My European brothers and sisters, I love you, but we hope that you keep that over there. But we know, we're realists over here, at least some of us, the ones paying attention, and we know that we will be impacted as well. That's how the game is played. In fact, Vladimir Putin has said as much, that we're not going to be able to sit this one out. So they've effectively voted politically to remove restrictions on Ukraine. This, of course, is the first step, the first box that needs to be checked before you finalize it in real terms, which is already a decision that's been made. The Russians know it's a decision that's been made. The Russian foreign minister has said as such, the decision to use NATO weaponry inside Russia has been made. And all of this, public relations stuff that is going on right now is just to prime the population, to test the waters, to get everybody acquainted with the idea. So when they finally do ultimately pull the trigger, and that's how we're going to learn about it, we're going to learn about it as it happens. And then it's going to have been official. Oh, yeah, we actually did green light the Ukrainians to use Storm Shadow missiles and ATACMS missiles deep inside Russia. That's how we're going to learn about it when it happens, because that's how we learned about Storm Shadows in the first place, if you don't recall, over a year ago. So this, of course, is a massive escalation, but it's also somewhat of a ruse, because Ukraine has the capability. They have their new ballistic missiles, which I'm certain that they've either used a more advanced drone or some sort of bunker penetrating drone or bunker busting missile, ballistic missile on the biggest ammunition depot in Russia that looked like a nuclear explosion, the one we talked about the other day. And the damage is catastrophic. There's some of the, what would you call them, silos, some of the bunkers, I guess, that were not affected by the blast. But the majority of the place has been destroyed. And this was this was the biggest ammunition dump that I could find on Google Earth. Now, the other big ammunition dump is the one that's in Transnistria. That's technically, allegedly, one of the biggest ones with Soviet-era munitions stored in it. The Russians, I don't even know if they have access to that, because, of course, they have to cross Ukraine in order to get it. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that it's already a done deal. Anybody, who's caught up in this, are they going to do it? Did NATO back down? NATO didn't back down. Okay? NATO didn't back down. The Russians know it. The Russians know that unless they do something definitive, NATO is not going to continue, they're not going to cease in its transgressions. So they must respond, but they are trying to postpone that for reasons unbeknownst to me. Now, it could have something to do with China, and China could be the same reason why Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is sitting on his hands and just continues his bellicose ramblings every single time Israel punches him in the mouth. He talks a bunch of trash, and they do absolutely nothing but fire a few willy-nilly rockets into some villages in the northern part of Israel that, by some international law, are currently being occupied by Israel illegally, I should say. Well, that depends on if you adhere to international law, of course. I mean, it is international law as agreed to by the international community, but of course, there's exceptions that get made. There's a global affirmative action of sorts, we'll say. Anyways, so the reason why Nasrallah is sitting on his hands and not punching back, even though we just witnessed the biggest ever kinetic cyber attack in human history, 4,000 to 5,000, we don't even know the true numbers of casualties, which is far worse than a death when it comes to war. Casualty is always worse than a death, especially if it's debilitating to the soldier and they can never go back and fight again. This was a massive blow to the chain of command in Hezbollah. They claim otherwise, but the fact is the ambassador of Iran was blinded by one of these pagers, which tells you that the people who had these pagers were probably pretty high up. The only way that he would be blinded when you see the size of these explosions is if he was looking at the thing. So that tells you that he had one, which means that probably a lot of their higher ranking commanders probably had him. Now, Nasrallah in his speech today denies this. He says none of our high ranking commanders were taken out by this. That could just be a way to try to placate and keep people at ease in his own community. For the first time ever, at least this go around, the Lebanese prime minister has given the green light and has given the blessing to Hezbollah to fight on Lebanon's behalf. Now, as I don't know much about the history of the region. I'm not an expert on Lebanese history and politics, but I do know that there is a divide between the militaristic political wing of the Lebanese government, which is Hezbollah, and the Lebanese government itself, which has established embassies, or at one point had functioning embassies up until a couple months ago, that did, business with the international community. Now they've finally given him the blessing. And Nasrallah is just talking out of his ass, doing absolutely nothing. Why? There's a reason. He is having his hands tied. It's quite evident. Because as soon as Hezbollah responds in a significant manner, which is going to really deal a blow to Israel strategically and essentially threaten their existence, because Israel's a small country and they're a very tech-dependent country. If you take out a few power stations, it's going to be panic. And it's a country with a lot of dual citizens who, at will, could leave if they so chose. So how bonded are they going to be to this terrain when, they've migrated there, a lot of them? Whereas people who've been born there and lived there for many generations, they're going to fight to the death, okay? And the problem is that if Hezbollah acts too drastically too soon, it's going to get nuclear. And I'm pretty sure this is why the Iranians, I'm pretty sure this is why the Russians and the Chinese have been trying to rein them in and restrain them from retaliating in the way that everybody knows they can. So what you have happening right now is that Israel is lining tanks up along the border. I think some have already passed into southern Lebanon. And they've been bombing the shit out of the place. 100 airstrikes today. By the time you watch it, there's probably going to be a lot more news. And of course, we had the biggest attack in history, the biggest cyber attack, which is still ongoing, apparently. So everybody's like, what's going on? Is Hezbollah chickening out? Did they get cold feet? Is this just a stalling tactic? I think it's a stalling tactic because, Nasrallah has invited Israel in to their killing field, which is a mountainous, treacherous terrain, which is also, I think they're going to have to contend with the weather. I'm not sure what the weather looks like this time of year, but from what I'm told, the weather is going to start to get nasty pretty soon. And it's also laden with subterranean fortifications that are far more advanced than what they face with Hamas. You also, I presume, have a fairly exhausted IDF, which is why they're flying in African conscripts, 30,000, I believe. and they're flying in Indians to work in to fulfill the roles, the gap that's been left, I suppose. So you know they're pressed for manpower. And as soon as Hezbollah hits them hard in any significant way with their precision-guided cruise missiles, so they claim, that are exceptional range that can effectively hit any part of Israel, any part that matters anyways, they are likely going to trigger a massive response. And the Americans are going to be brought into the war. All of this is timed to reach its zenith right at the election. You'll notice that. And it's also perfectly timed with the escalation with Russia, which tells you that all of these things are interconnected, okay? So it's no coincidence that the former Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, has now, with Vladimir Putin and the Iranian president, inked a deal for a strategic partnership. I think the reason why the Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese are stalling on getting Lebanon to do the real response, if they even can, I'm not, at this point in time, I don't know. Maybe it's all talk. But I think one possible explanation is that they're waiting for Iran to get some sort of security guarantees from Russia, be they being under their nuclear umbrella and having those levels of protection. We know that there's been a hell of a lot of military equipment flying in to Iran, as well as planes that typically carry military personnel. So that would mean that there could potentially already be nuclear weapons there, Russian nuclear weapons. And if that's the case, then that's a game changer. Because then, if Hezbollah responds, Israel can't use nukes because there's a balance of power within the region. Now, Israel can just shoot nukes in all directions, but that's going to be their own death, right? Even if you use a nuke in Lebanon, a lot of that radiation is going to blow back into Israel, just the way the jet stream, north to south, or at least it could, depending on the time of year, okay? So these are all things to consider. It's not just a matter of use a nuke and that's it. They could do it ground-based detonation, which might contain the radioactive material to just the region that was hit. But if they do like ground bursts and they're trying to take out bunkers and things like that, then that's going to kick up all kinds of crazy dust, and it's going to get nasty for Israel as well. And I don't think they want to contaminate their own soil. That would be stupid, right? It's like shitting where you eat. So they can't do that. So I think that this is all connected. I think that increasingly more so, the escalation that we've seen with the massive detonation of one of Russia's largest, in fact, at least the largest I could find in my research online in terms of their most hardened facilities, blown to smithereens. I would say at least 75% of it is destroyed. We don't know what was stored there, but we do know that that is a part of their northern military, and that would be the conventional munitions that they would use for if they went to war with the Baltics, which seems increasingly more likely. You have the aggressive bellicosity of the Baltic states. I mean, they're just asking for it. Like they're building fortifications on their borders. They're welcoming in the Germans. They're allowing NATO to use its airspace. They're storing NATO weaponry. They're making evacuation plans to evacuate everybody. I don't know, like across the Baltic or something. So they're getting ready for war, right? And they know that all of this tough talk, like these calls for bombing Moscow and this crazy shit that they're saying, eventually they're going to have to pay for that. And now that Russia has had constant provocation after provocation, taking out the radars, taking out the nuke bombers, taking out their biggest, baddest ass base, which was supposed to be nuclear resistant, but we start to see there's probably a lot of corruption there that prevented that from actually going the way it was supposed to. So we know that the Russians, as much as they try to play this down, and as much as a lot of the Russian bots try to play this down, this was a big blow. And if we see another one of these big blows tomorrow and the next day and the next day, which has pretty much been the pattern, eventually that's going to take its toll. And you can make the claim, like the Russia bros will make the claim, well, you know, Russia's using 15,000 tons of ammunition a day, and that this warehouse stored maybe 30,000 tons at best, so it was just 2 days. And the question is, it's like, well, you know, maybe that's true, maybe that's an exaggeration. I'm guessing it's a bit of an exaggeration. Everything has its limit, okay? And the Russians are already mobilizing more troops. Vladimir Putin has said that this is a red line, that there will be an appropriate response. And because he stopped short of saying that we will target NATO directly, the decision has been made. So don't believe for a second any of these people who are saying that NATO has backed down. They don't know what they're talking about. Because this is the same pattern. It's like almost like they just never learn. NATO always does this. Every single time they're about to escalate, first they propose something, then it gets rejected, then they propose it again, then they're talking about it, then they propose it again, and everybody thinks that it's been agreed to, but it hasn't quite yet, and then they just do it, and then we're like, oh, they did it, right? So it's exactly what they're going to do here. And they know that Vladimir Putin doesn't want a nuclear war, but it's likely what's going to have to be fought in some hopefully limited capacity, as crazy as that sounds. We'll save more on that for another day, because that's a very deep rabbit hole in terms of how it's actually going to play out. Because believe it or not, NATO does have a very in-depth plan on how they want to initiate a nuclear war and do a first strike. Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen guy, who Elon Musk, I guess he got I don't think Elon Musk gave him a Cybertruck, but I think he somehow was able to acquire a Cybertruck. And at the time, I said, this is the dumbest thing ever. This thing is like a surveillance apparatus on wheels. Why the hell would you drive around in this? I mean, all Teslas have an internet connection. So information from that could be relayed back to anywhere, to Starlink, to anywhere. So apparently he claims that Elon Musk locked him out of it. Now, I don't know if he's joking or if there was a software thing, or maybe he did get him locked out. But this is just another reminder that you can't rely on electronic devices when the shit hits the fan. As we've seen, every electronic device that's connected to the Internet of Things is a potential attack vector, and it can actually, now we've shown that it could be a kinetic attack, a physical attack. You can, even if it's just lighting your battery on fire, that's something. That's a phone that you can no longer use. That's an electronic device that you're never going to be able to use again. Worst case, of course, it explodes. Now, in the Cybertruck case, and the reason why initially I was all for it, because all the specs lined up. You can charge it from the sun. Requires very little maintenance. It's bulletproof from a 9mm. All of these great things. But then I started reading some of the fine print. And as much as I'm not a technophobe, I have a Tesla. Some of you guys know, but I also have a Tundra. Okay, and I'm actually considering trading in the Tundra for something of the diesel sort, but more on that in a future video. Because again, I'm not a technophobe, it's a tax write-off anyways. So I've come to realize though that it is the absolute worst Trojan horse that one could possibly expose themselves to, especially in this very extreme political environment. Because not only can you not manually turn the wheels, but they can just turn it off. It has the power steering, not the power, what do they call it? The power direct steering. So you're not actually turning the wheel like you would in a normal car. It's sending an electric signal to the tires. So if they want you to park and never move that sucker, it's going to get bricked. Okay, they can hear everything. They can watch everything you're doing. Now, if we're talking about a shit hits the fan, because a lot of the Hollywood people, they're buying these because they think that they're going to use them in the apocalypse or something. And as much as I think EVs play a role in that, and EVs are an excellent preparedness vehicle concept, if you could jailbreak it and strip it of all of the surveillance stuff that's inside it, then yeah, it would be very useful. They're way, you know, I mean, you can power a car by solar indefinitely. You don't have to do much maintenance. I've never had to do any maintenance to the Tesla aside change of tires. No brake fluid, no oil change, nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. Okay, so it is a superior technology. Once you drive one, you're just gonna be like, what the hell? Like, you're gonna look at your combustion vehicle like it's a dinosaur piece of shit. Like, just to be brutally honest, when I have to drive into the tundra, it's like I'm going back in time or something. But there still is a place for a good old gas guzzling vehicle. Don't get me wrong about that. But all I'm saying is, electronics nowadays, I don't care if it's Elon Musk, do not trust him. Do not stake your life on him. And at this point, I think we're going to keep things beyond arm's reach because you just never know. I'm going to save the rest for later. I promise we're going to be doing another video this evening because there's a lot of stuff to cover. I apologize for not, I said I was going to be back online yesterday. I just got caught up doing other stuff. We're doing all kinds of filming of actual educational content on the channel, which eats away my time. I'm on the homestead. I'm trying to get this place on lock before the shizzy hits the fizzy. Time is of the essence, but I will be back with a more extensive report by the time you see this video, 10 hours or so. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. See you soon.